My pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dan Barker, who is the co-president of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Dan and I have also, like Bobby and I, been doing this for a little while together. And Dan and I have some zany stories, some of which revolve around California. And I don't want to eat into his time. He's looking at his watch.
No.
But we were up at,
Monterey.
Monterey. We're up in Monterey. And Dan was giving a talk, and we reserved a room there. We were trying to get a group started there. And these two women had come in, like, very late into the talk. And during the Q&A, one of them raised their questions. And rather than saying, I have a question, she began with, I have a statement. And proceeded to, just talk non-stop for the next, 20 minutes. Unreal. We eventually had to call campus security.
And she came up to the front.
She came up to the front, was like standing right next to Dan, all about, Jesus Christ. But anyhow, I will not eat any more of Dan's time. Please join me in welcoming Dan.
We do go way back. I know what his apartment looked like when he was a college student.
Fortunately, all the photos have been destroyed.
August he's a good leader for this group because he ran a group himself successfully in Ohio and knows what he's talking about. It was a debate, wasn't it? I think it was a debate that I came to do.
Yes.
And next month I'll be doing my 87th public debate. This time with Dinesh D'Souza at UCSD. March the 7th, Monday night at UCSD, is Religion the Problem? And this is Dinesh's and my 6th public debate. So please come, tell all your friends. Usually when I go talk at campus groups, and I was here before. When was it? Like a couple years ago? You had just started, right? And you were just as good then as now, so... Usually when I go places, the students give me something. And a couple weeks ago, I was in Iowa, and the group called Unify for Darwin Week gave me their T-shirt. And I can't tell you how many T-shirts I have from student groups. University of Northern Iowa Freethinkers and Inquirers. But I can tell that I have finally arrived in the world because on the back of the shirt is a quote by a famous freethinker. So I'm keeping this one. So I want to give you something this time. Imagine No Religion tote bag for the group. But Evan, you can.
Thank
you can have. All right. We have a national radio broadcast called Free Thought Radio, which is coming up to 5 years now. I think we're at the computer number of 255 shows. So now we're going to go into an overbite. Those of you who know computer terms, okay. And I try to find a joke for every single show. The joke for today's show, it aired today in Madison, Wisconsin, and in Monterey, by the way. They're playing the radio station. Our guest today is Pete Stark, member of Congress. The first time we've had a member of Congress on our show. The only and first openly non-theistic member of the U.S. Congress. And it's a great show, and he tells stories about when he was a kid in Sunday school, but you have to listen to the show to hear it. But the joke for today's show was this homeless guy had a heart attack. They rushed him to a Catholic hospital. They revived him, and in the recovery room, the doctor and the nuns came in and said, how are you going to pay for this? Do you have any health insurance? And the guy said, no, I don't have any. Well, do you have any money? And he said, no, I don't. No bank account, nothing. Well, do you have any relatives? And he said, well, I just have one sister, but she's an old spinster nun. And the nun said, I beg your pardon, but nuns are not spinsters. They're married to Jesus. And the guy said, oh, well, then send the bill to my brother-in-law. And if you know any good jokes, let me know. Because I need them. I have about 50 really good ones, but I've already shot those 50 good ones. And they have to be the kind that you can tell on the radio. So, as you know, I used to be a preacher. I preached for 19 years. Then I became an atheist in 1983. And it wasn't 30 years ago, Bobby. It was 26 or 27 years ago when we met. Atheist United. I gave a talk there in, I think it was the late summer of '84 for that group. One of the very first times I spoke publicly about my atheism. And the very first time was on Oprah Winfrey's show, which was really different. I'd never spoken before a hostile audience before, and it was pretty exciting to... It's different, you know. As a preacher, you're used to all this adulation and approval, and here she had packed that show, the audience, with a bunch of Bible thumpers, and it was really good TV, actually. It was pretty interesting. And we have a videotape of that show. In fact, Annie and Lori and I, we're married now. We met that day. We met on the show, so we have a video of the day we met, which is kind of cool. You can see us kind of like checking each other out, you know. And I had never knowingly met any open atheists before. We've all met atheists, but that was the first time. I tell my story in the book Godless. There's some copies in the back table out there. Godless, how an evangelical preacher became one of America's leading atheists. This year, last month, another of my books just came out. It's called The Good Atheist, and it's a direct answer to Rick Warren. Rick Warren's, his purpose-driven life. I wanted to call the book, and I still would like to call it, Life-Driven Purpose, as a direct affront to him, but the publishers got scared. They thought they might get sued. So it's called The Good Atheist, and it's really about purpose in life. The good news is that there is no purpose of life. And we shouldn't want there to be a purpose of life. It's great that there's no purpose of life, because if there's a purpose of life, that cheapens life. That makes us secondary to some slave master or some tool maker who makes us for a purpose. But to say there's no purpose of life doesn't mean there's no purpose in life. As long as there's problems to solve, knowledge to gain, beauty to create, inequality to eradicate, as long as there's a problem or a challenge, there's purpose in your life. And then the second half of my book is more than 300 profiles of atheists and agnostics who indeed lived lives of immense purpose trying to solve a problem. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, for example, who would dare say she did not have purpose in life, working for half a century for the women's right to participate in their democracy. So you can find some copies of The Good Atheist on the back table as well. The Freedom from Religion Foundation is right now the country's largest organization of atheists and agnostics. We have more than 16,000 members. Atheists, agnostics, secular humanists, whatever we call ourselves, we don't care. We all disbelieve in the same God. So that unites us. We work to keep state and church separate, which I want to talk about briefly today, and to educate the public about the views of non-theists. How many of you would like $2,000? It's yours. We just announced. You have to win an essay contest, but it's yours if you win. We just announced 3 student essay contests. One's for high school seniors going into college. Describe a moment that made you proud to be a free thinker, atheist, agnostic, non-believer. $2,000 first prize. It's the $1,000 second prize. It's the Herbert Bouchang Award for high school. For college students, why I am an atheist, agnostic, unbeliever, or why I am not a fill in the blank. Like Bertrand Russell's Why I'm Not a Christian. So why I am not. This would be a pretty easy one for any of you to enter. Again, 2,000, 1,000, 500, 300, and then a bunch of honorable mentions. And for those of you who are graduating or going on to grad school, we just have a brand new grad school level essay contest, or 25 and above. So this one is why Thomas Jefferson got it right. Why the endangered wall of separation between church and state must be defended. These are on the back table. If you're interested, if you're a half decent writer, enter, because we get a lot of really bad essays. Really, and yours will rise like to the top. You probably heard about the foundation. We won a major federal lawsuit last year on April the 15th, declaring the National Day of Prayer unconstitutional. It was really fun. And the religious right is really mad at us. Yeah. You probably heard within about 2 hours on April the 15th, after the announcement of that decision came down, It's enjoining the president. It's not often that you can enjoin the president of the United States. We sued Bush, but then we had to switch it to Obama. Within 2 hours of the announcement of it, and I'm sure no one at the White House even read the decision. It's a wonderful decision, by the way, Judge Barbara Crabb. They sent out a tweet from the White House assuring everybody, by the way, in light of this federal decision that is unconstitutional, we're still going to do it this year, so don't panic, basically. Because the judge said the decision was pending all the final appeals. And within a few days, Obama and the White House appealed their loss. Briefs were filed. We had oral arguments in December in the 7th Circuit in Chicago, and we're waiting for that court to decide. We might lose at that level. We got 3 judges, and 2 of them are kind of bad. One of them, she's wonderful, Judge Williams, was really great on state church separation, but we got Mannion and Easterbrook, who don't have a great record. So we would have to appeal that to the en banc, all 15. In any event, watch that. We like to sue the government. That's a good way to make news is to file a federal lawsuit. I know not all your groups can do that, but we also have a Student Activist Award. Any students in the country, high school or college level, who do something state church activism, we offer an award with a cash award and invite them to talk at our annual convention. This year it's a student named Sarah in Virginia, Giles County, Virginia, started posting the 10 Commandments in all the schools, which is unconstitutional. There was this Stone v. Graham decision that it's a no-brainer. And so she complained as a high school student. She stuck with it. She continued. She contacted the district. She complained and complained, and they took it down. But the community got so mad there was a backlash, they put him back up again. She's in college now, so we're offering her the award for her tenacity in challenging a violation of state church separation. And we're going to file a lawsuit. We have at least three good families now in that county who are coming forward as plaintiffs that have children in the schools. And probably a 4th family now is coming forward. And one of the families is religious. In fact, the guy in the high school is a Christian, but he doesn't think religion and government should mix. He thinks that when you mix religion and government, they both get dirty. And he's right. So you might think of some way to complain or be an activist on state church separation as well. We also have an Out of the Closet campaign. We, in 2007, started putting up billboards and bus signs. And how would you like to be on a billboard? We look on page 14 of your... there's some examples of some of our Out of the Closet campaign. We had 23 people in Madison, Wisconsin. We have about a dozen that are going up in Raleigh. And you might want to help us get involved in a campaign in your area. It's real people with real names. Meet your local atheist, agnostic, secular humanist. Put a face on non-belief. And I'm not going to give you details now, but in about a month we're going to announce internet campaign to do the same thing. So we'll let you know how you can be at least on a billboard that we're going to put up, internet-type billboard, Out of the Closet. So, the separation of state and church. How can you be an anti-disestablishmentarianist? By the way, when I gave Liz the title for my talk, I got it wrong. The word's too short. Go to page 3 or page 7 and add the letters IST after it. That's the actual word. Anti-disestablishmentarianist. So how can you be an anti-disestablishmentarianist? There used to be established churches, and there still are established churches in many countries. And the move to disestablish the church, especially in England and other European countries, was because of the preferential treatment and the discrimination that the churches were giving. And so there were people who said, let's disestablish the church. They were disestablishmentarianists, is what they were called. And of course, religious people who fought them were called anti-disestablishmentarianists, who thought, no, we need to keep the church established. Our country was wise in that we did not even establish the church in the first place. Many of the colonies had established religions, but our founders, a century and a half after the colonies, who really founded our country, wanted no part of the divisiveness and the smallness. They used to excommunicate, they used to exclude, they used to deny people voting if you didn't believe in the Trinity. They used to banish, and so these established religions in the colonies were divisive, and our founders wisely wanted no part of that. They wrote a constitution, the first constitution in history, that is godless. And you'd be surprised how many high school classes I talked to when I asked them, how many times is God in the Constitution? Some of them say 12, 7. It's 0. There is no God in the U.S. Constitution. And in fact, there's a phrase in Article 2 that there shall be no religious test for public office. Why would our founders have bothered to put that phrase in the Constitution, that there shall be no religious test for public office? They were obviously thinking about it. The Ten Commandments, by the way, is not a founding document of America. If you look at the entire Constitutional Convention, how many times do you think the Ten Commandments were mentioned in the Constitutional Convention when our Constitution was being hammered out? How many times?
I don't know, 12?
I want you to see you in my office after... 0 times. How many times was Christianity or Jesus mentioned? 0 times, right? How many times was the Bible mentioned during the entire Constitutional Convention? How many times was the Bible mentioned? 0. It's supposed to be one of our founding documents. Mike Newdow told us this at his talk he gave a couple of weeks ago. He read through the whole thing. Although the word God did appear, can you guess how many times the word God came up? 3 times. When Franklin made that appeal to pray, which failed, there was no prayer at the Constitutional Convention, one of the senators said something like, "Good God, can we do that?" And there was another phrase, and I can't quote exactly, which is saying, how can we have the consent of the government? Doesn't that go against the consent, the God? They were aware of the fact that they were creating something special and unique. And the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution is our bread and butter as an organization. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. There's that establishment clause. The First Amendment is loosely described as the freedoms of conscience. You know what the 5 freedoms of conscience are in the First Amendment: religion, speech, press, assembly, and to petition the government. And we love to petition the government for redress of grievances. But before those 5 freedoms are spelled out in the First Amendment, first there's a non-freedom. Think about it. Here's these 5 freedoms, but before it comes a non-freedom. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or, and then here's the 5 freedoms, right? So the very first phrase of the very First Amendment of the Bill of Rights is a non-freedom imposed on the government, not on the people. The government can't do anything respecting or leaning towards an establishment of religion. So our lawsuits and our complaints, we just hired our second full-time attorney, Patrick Elliott. Rebecca Markert is a wonderful lead staff attorney. They send out 40 or 50 letters a month complaining about, you name it. In December it was nativity scenes and some menorahs. But it's a lot of prayers at government meetings, prayers at city council meetings and county executive meetings and so on. And then the schools is a big deal. We send a lot of letters to schools. They send a letter to the schools in Hamilton County, Tennessee, which is where Chattanooga is, pointing out that they should not be having prayer over the loudspeakers at the football games because the Supreme Court has decided this already. And the superintendent of the schools, a wonderful, smart black superintendent of the schools, sent out a memo to all of the schools in the district saying that we have to stop this. And can you imagine the backlash that came from that? The backlash from, and then so they stopped it. But during the next football game, they went down to play Ray County, which is where Dayton, Tennessee is, the Scopes trial. Yeah. All the parents and all the students from the stands rushed down to the 50-yard line, and they had a prayer anyway. But it wasn't officially sponsored. So we send out a lot of letters. We do legal lawsuits. We complain. And you can do the same thing. Our group started just as at a dining room table. Ann and Annie Laurie Gaylor started making complaints. They complained about prayers in the 1970s at a city council meeting where it was an issue about women's rights that came up. And there was a priest up there opening the meeting. And so Ann protested. She said, wait a minute. What business do they have at our secular civil government meeting? And a reporter was there and said, who are you guys? What are you complaining? Do you have a group? And Ann said, oh, well, we are people who want freedom from religion. And he said, freedom from religion, is that your group? And she said, yeah. And so he put a story in the paper, and she started getting phone calls. How can I join your group? This sounds great. And it just started with some little cards on the table, and now more than 16,000 people who want freedom from religion. And you can do the same thing in your group. You can be an anti-disestablishmentarianist by looking for violations of state-church separation. It might be at your school. In fact, there's a lot of schools that do cross the line sometimes. It could be at the military academy. It could be when you go down to City Hall for something and you see them praying. It could be the high school choir director having a winter concert that's 95% Christmas carols held in his church. You know, things like that, where obviously they're crossing the line. We wouldn't complain if it was one or two Christmas carols along with maybe some Hanukkah songs and Kwanzaa, and we wouldn't care. We wouldn't complain because that would be diversity. But if it looks like there's a religious intent behind any government actor at any level, the post office is pretty good, by the way. If you see a nativity scene in a post office, they're usually pretty good about following their policies. Although they still kept Mother Teresa on the stamp last year. Did you see me on The Daily Show on that issue last year? It was pretty silly. I didn't know what I was walking into, but they made me look like this conspiracy nut because, you know. But anyway, complain. Your group has the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. That's in the First Amendment. You have every right, as any other American citizen, to get up and make a complaint. And here's what I would suggest. This is what Ann and Annie Laurie have been doing for decades. Write a letter of complaint to the executive who's violating the Constitution in some way. One page, maybe two, write a letter, an actual letter that you mail. There's these things called stamps that you...
They have Mother Teresa.
They have Mother Teresa on them, that's right. And then we would all like the media to pay attention to our views. Wouldn't that be nice if we sent them letters and they just did it, right? Wouldn't that be wonderful? How can you get media exposure? Well, in the media, the news media is news media, supposedly. They're supposed to objectively, unless it's Fox TV, but they're supposed to objectively report news, right? They don't want to be seen as a vehicle or a billboard for somebody's view. You might write some op-eds or write some letters, and you might have some success. And especially if you find somebody sympathetic. So write those letters and write those op-eds. But the best way to get news attention is to do something newsworthy. Not just opinion, but hand them some news. Say, our group has written a letter to principal, post office master, governor, mayor, whoever, alerting them to this violation of state-church separation, asking them to stop. We have every right to ask them. And then that letter that you send to that person, make a copy of it and put it behind your press release. Send out a press release then that says, we have sent a letter. A letter has been sent asking for this violation to be stopped. Maybe quote a couple of sentences from your letter. And then hand that to the news. You'd be surprised how the odds of getting covered increase a lot because you're now giving them something they can look at. They've got a document. They can call that principal and say, what are you going to do about this? They can actually write a news story about your complaint. So it's nice to complain, but do it in a newsworthy way. If you can't file a federal lawsuit or a state lawsuit, or if you can't be a plaintiff, and by the way, one of you might want to be a plaintiff if you come into contact with the violation of state-church separation. We need real bodies. We've had cases that we've loved to have taken. In fact, our National Day of Prayer lawsuit started that way. A person came forward and complained about a sheriff's office having a prayer breakfast, but then they got cold feet. They had to keep their head down in that community, and they didn't want to be noticed. So we couldn't go forward with a lawsuit in that county, but that prompted us to sue at the federal level, which is interesting. So maybe you might want to step forward as a plaintiff, as an injured person, and say, my rights are being violated, and I would be glad to lend my name. We have a couple other lawsuits in the courts besides the National Day of Prayer one. The clergy parsonage exemption, members of the clergy, and that's been broadened so much it even includes basketball coaches at Catholic high schools. I mean, they are allowed to not deduct, but to exclude from their tax liability, their income, their rent or their house payment. And none of the rest of us are allowed to do that. So we're suing over that IRS exclusion, and if we get a good decision out of that, you're going to see a lot of mad religious right people. So complain, write letters, look for these things. You have every right. You can sue the President of the United States as an American citizen. We have the right to petition our government. And the very first part of our Bill of Rights says the government cannot do anything that's respecting an establishment of religion. And by the way, the 14th Amendment, Due Process Clause, applies that Congress to the whole country. So you can't just, the religious right sometimes says that the First Amendment starts with Congress, but now we know, of course, and established law has settled that there are some freedoms that are hardwired into our Constitution that no local majority can vote away. So stand up, be proud of our country, be pro-American, be patriotic, and if somebody's breaking the law, you're helping our country by pointing that out and by asking them to stop and expecting them to stop. And if it's a bad teacher who's violating the law, well, that's an inept teacher. Ask them to be fired. They shouldn't be teaching if they are violating their oath of office by inserting and intruding their own private religious views into the public setting. I have a million more things to say. You know, I used to be a preacher, and I've said this before, but did you know the word reverend was a typo? Did you know that? The first letter used to be an N. Okay.